Donald J. Trump is easily the worst president in the history of our nation. He's despised, detested, and ridiculed around the world. If you think the November election is going to be a battle between Trump and Joe Biden, you're mistaken. They are both symbols. The real battle is between two sets of Americans.
The November election is going to be a coast-to-coast battle, a referendum between two vastly different views of America. Bluntly, this election comes down to deciding whether we are going to have a national government run by a cult. I'll explain why this is not an exaggeration. There are many people, hopefully a clear majority, who want a normal, even-handed, transparent federal government, the kind we used to complain about but often counted on. On the other side are the mostly white haters. They've become a cult, mindlessly believing whatever their leader tells them. The Trump cult doesn't care that the president is a flim-flam man, a chronic liar, and blatant criminal. They don't care that he is destroying our system of government, because that's what they want. Their goal, despite all denials, is to gradually but steadily destroy our constitutional democratic republic and replace it with a neo-Nazi, white-ruled monarchy and/or dictatorship. It's important that we understand this is what the November election comes down to: changing our form of government or restoring what we had. The Trump cultists are terrified by the world's randomness and relentless change. They crave, deeply crave, the rigid order of an authoritarian or fascist dictatorship, a national government that will impose a white supremacy culture and so-called Christian rule. Many whites in so-called red states want apartheid in America. They want a return to second-class status for non-whites. For the Trump cult, America is on the wrong track unless it's on the track of white rule. Even though they rail against the status quo, Trump supporters are gullible stooges for the ruling class. This is the 1%, the wealthy bandits who have gutted the middle class. Ignorance is why the Trumpers support taxation that favors the rich while screwing them. The wealthy blaming others for middle-class troubles, it has happened before. In the Nazi era, Germany's wealthy class hated democracy and helped Hitler acquire and consolidate power. He didn't do it alone. In return, Hitler provided Germany's industrialists with slave labor and lucrative contracts. America's wealthy class has robbed the middle class for years, stealing billions from pension funds and perpetrating mortgage scams. It's why America's middle class lives paycheck to paycheck. To hide their wholesale looting of America's middle class, the top 10% have turned to media propagandists. These broadcast rabble-rousers work daily to convince uneducated conservative whites that all their problems are due to immigrants and people who are black and brown. It puts the focus on people who are easy to hate because they have no power and no pulpit from which to fight back, and they're not white. Most Trump cult followers are not bright enough to see this. These Trump supporters are so delusional they've become a cult. They believe Trump was sent by God to deliver white Americans from brown people, black people, and anyone who doesn't believe what they believe. Rational Americans need to understand the November election is a struggle between cult zealots and the rest of us. Trump, one of the biggest megalomaniacs the world has ever seen, doesn't dispute his cult's belief that he was sent by God, because it fits his godlike view of himself. Many commentators have compared him to Jim Jones, the infamous cult leader who presided in 1978 over the mass murder-suicide of 918 men, women, and children. Most died by drinking a grape-flavored drink laced with cyanide. Trump's suggestion that his followers might defeat the coronavirus by drinking bleach or household cleanser is eerily reminiscent of the Jim Jones cult. Dr. Justin Frank, a psychoanalyst, has written several books about the minds of presidents. Frank says Donald Trump is the Jim Jones of American presidents. Normal people who are fed up with this epic loser have had a field day mocking him on social media and in public, but his idolaters don't care. Trump's cult followers love to thump the Bible when it suits their purpose. If they were true Christians, they would have to face the realization that Trump is a false god who has led them astray. The Trump cult is made up of millions of idolaters who pretend to be Christians. In truth, they worship a false god, just as the Bible warned would happen. Trump is a crybaby when he isn't being a nasty bully. He wallows in the role of victim. His cult is fine with that because they love to view themselves as victims, persecuted for their alleged faith, just like the saints in the Bible. The November election is a struggle against Trump's enablers. Without them, we wouldn't have him. And it's vital that those of us who don't drink Trump's Kool-Aid understand it's these zealots we're up against come Election Day.
They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
The Republican Party has bowed down and provided profiles in cowardice in the face of this dangerous political climate. But they recognize it for what it is.
It's becoming a cultish thing, isn't it? It's not a good place for any party to end up with a cult-like situation as it relates to a president that happens to be purportedly of the same party.
Any sane, rational, thinking grown-up would look at Donald Trump and wonder how so many seemingly intelligent Americans could support a man who is clearly unfit for the office. Hardcore Trump supporters are not like you and me, in case you haven't noticed. First and foremost, they are haters. Hate is what gets them up in the morning. Hate drives their day. They hate our government, truly hate it. They hate liberals. They blame libtards for the erosion of white rule. The majority of Trump supporters have feeble brains. They're mostly uneducated and devoid of all thought and reason. They have to be told what to think. That's why they incessantly listen to right-wing AM talk radio. The well-paid neo-fascist propagandists on the radio tell them how to think and what to think. And they toss out occasional one-liners that Trump supporters can easily remember and parrot mindlessly in political arguments. It's no surprise that they hate intellectuals. They hate the people who believe in science, which refutes and discredits their crude, ignorant superstitions. They hate civil rights. The 1964 Civil Rights Act was a low point for the Trump cult. They hate Barack Obama and the 2 terms he spent in the White House. They hate minorities. They hate immigrants. Despite all their yammering about law and order, they hate the rule of law. They watch FAW News and listen to right-wing talk radio for a steady diet of biased, mostly fact-free propaganda to nourish their hate and anger. The mainstream media does not seem to understand the dynamic of all of this. All of the endless opinion pieces and commentaries about how Trump is the most wretched president in American history are relished by the Trump cult. That's because they hate the media, too. Trump understands this. He figured out the Twitter system lets him communicate directly with his haters. He uses it every day to drive a wedge between us and them. During the pandemic, Trump has acted like he's Santa Claus, doling out ventilators, face masks, and other personal protection equipment. The desperately needed equipment goes to the governors and mayors who kiss his ass and tell him how generous and wonderful he is. His cult thinks he's done a great job. Salon, the online magazine, argues Donald Trump's refusal to wear a protective mask, even while touring a factory making them, is a fascist signal to his cult about the weak and the strong.
Sitting in the Oval Office, behind that beautiful Resolute desk, the great Resolute desk, I think wearing a face mask as I greet presidents, prime ministers, dictators, kings, queens. I don't know. Somehow, I don't see it for myself.
Salon cites an Associated Press article claiming Trump told advisors that wearing a mask would send the wrong message. The Associated Press reported the president said doing so would make it seem like he's preoccupied with health instead of focused on reopening the nation's economy. The magazine states the fascist personality is one that rejects even the possibility of sickness. To wear a mask is to publicly admit that one's body is susceptible to illness, which is coded as weak and therefore unacceptable. Conventional wisdom in the media business says don't attack or even criticize the public. You risk losing viewers or readers. That's cowardly crap journalism style. Trump's cult following got us into this crisis of government. We need to tell it like it is. A famous American politician, William Jennings Bryan, once said, "Our government, conceived in freedom and purchased with blood, can be preserved only by constant vigilance." They are words worth remembering as our nation stumbles closer to November.
You, me, we are not going to change the Trump Kool-Aid drinkers. But we, the middle and the left, must be clear the election is about turning back the clock or moving forward.